Good morning. Welcome to the State of the City address in Monterey. Sam Phillips, the president of McPo, is caught in traffic. So my job this morning to welcome you and to introduce the two gentlemen on my right, who most of you know, Mayor Della Sala and the interim city manager, Mike McCarthy. And with that, the mayor's going to start, and then when Sam gets here, he has some prepared questions that he may ask. But when it gets to the question and answer period, we're going to invite you to ask all the questions that you want. So with that, Mr. Mayor.
Great. Well, thank you, Bob, for your introduction, and thank you all for attending this meeting of the State of the City address in January of 2014. To my right, as many of you may know, is our interim city manager, Mike McCarthy. Mike served as the assistant city manager for about a year and a half and is now serving as the interim city manager and doing an outstanding job for us. So I will begin with a few remarks, and then Mike will talk a little bit about the budget, and then I'll take the microphone back from Mike and talk about a few other things that have been going on here in the city of Monterey. I want to thank the Monterey Commercial Property Owners Association, OMBA, and MCHA for providing us this opportunity to address you on the significant accomplishments that we have been able to bring forward, as well as the challenges that we face in the future. Let's begin with this particular building. Monterey Conference Center, built in 1977, some 36, 37 years old now, a major accomplishment of the Canello administration. It has served the city of Monterey very, very well. It is well maintained. As you may have noticed, the floors are polished, the carpets are clean and vacuumed, and it's a great old place. Operative word being old. It no longer meets the technological requirements of today's meeting planners. The interior improvements here are not aligned with what meeting planners want. There needs to be a reconfiguration of the interior space, the interior walls of this wonderful old building. It needs a new facade. It needs a new identity. It needs to be, again, a beacon for downtown Monterey. For in this building, we host people from around the world. And as such, we are expected to have a top drawer facility in order to continue to draw people from around the world who stay in our hotels, who eat in our restaurants, and who shop in our retail establishments. So how do we get this done? Well, the hoteliers felt that this facility was so important to their business and to the economy of the city of Monterey that they came forward and told the city council, if we can develop a top drawer renovation of this conference facility, we as the hoteliers will pay for it. Good news. Monterey City Council was educated and informed by the business community that the preferred alternative of approximately $32 million in improvements to this facility was the right course of action. The council agreed. Ballots have already been mailed to the hoteliers who will vote on this matter to tax themselves in order to fund the $32 million renovation. The adjacent hotels will pay a little over 4%. I believe it's 4.16% of the revenue towards the revenue stream that's needed to finance the improvement. The full-service hotels outside the adjacent hotels will pay 1.6% of the revenue that they collect towards this fund, and the limited service properties 0.8% of the revenue. That funding source, of course, is critical. The hoteliers said, if you go along with the preferred alternative, we will pay for it. Ballots are out. They're expected to be returned by the end of February. If there is a 50% plus one vote positive response to funding the $32 million improvement on July 1st of this year, they will start taxing the occupants of the hotels. So that is the good news scenario. The good news scenario is your council has listened to you, the business community, who are experts in business, just as they listen to the residents and their needs in their residential neighborhoods, because they are the experts in the residential neighborhoods. You should be very, very pleased and proud of your accomplishment. This is a significant milestone in the history of Monterey, and we are fairly confident that this vote will be positive. So with that, I'll just say one more thing about the conference center, and then Mike will talk a little bit about our budget challenges. As we entertain people who come here from around the world, we have to have state-of-the-art technology. The state-of-the-art technology that provides for multiple foreign language translations at the same time. We in Monterey could become a global center. We have the physical and intellectual assets to deliver that product. Bear in mind the Monterey Institute of International Studies, the Defense Language Institute, one of the finest foreign language training centers in the world, the Naval Postgraduate School with its Homeland Security component that benefits not just this area, but in fact the country. The Fleet Numerical Department over there on Airport Road. All these institutions combined together create a synergy that provides for a wonderful environment for people to come here and learn. And this is the center in which they would do it. So as a mayor of Monterey, I want to congratulate you who are in the business community, who had the foresight, who had the ability to convince and to inform the city council that the preferred alternative was the way to go. So with that, I'll now turn the mic over to Mike, and he'll talk a little bit about the budget.
Well, first off, thank you so much for having me here, and Bob, thank you for the invite. I really appreciate it, and it's an honor to not only be here, but to serve the city. This morning, I was having breakfast with my kids, and we talked about what our plans are for the day, and I said, I'm going to give a long speech this morning, and my 7-year-old, without missing a beat, said, well, Dad, that's what you said Fred does. So, Fred's not here, is he? So, okay.
He'll see it on.
He'll see it, won't he? Yeah. I just want to give you just a quick snapshot of our budget this year and the coming years. In this current fiscal year, we're looking at about a $500,000 deficit. Now, that's a big number, but we'll be able to realize those savings through freezing some positions, probably positions that are already vacant. We may have to defer a project or two to make that savings, but I don't see it as a significant challenge this fiscal year. If we don't make structural changes to the budget this year, which would mean eliminating positions or canceling services this year, we'll be looking at about $1 million shortfall next fiscal year. Now, again, these numbers are fluid and they'll be coming in. And then the following fiscal year, we'll be looking at about a $1.5 million shortfall in our structural budget. Those are big numbers. And if we don't have a revenue measure or some way in which to increase our revenues, we'll have to make some structural changes. And I will bring a balanced budget to the council this year for some changes, but if we do think that there will be a revenue measure, I'll suggest that we make one-time changes rather than structural changes. One of the concerns that one of the questions I often get is where are our revenues and where are they trending? And I'll just give you a quick snapshot of our big three. TOT, we're projecting we should be about $400,000 ahead of where we projected this year. We had a nice bump in summer. We haven't projected yet if there's going to be a bump in winter, although I think we know that with the dry weather in Tahoe, there's been quite an uptick here, but we haven't seen those reflections yet, so we're hopeful that there'll be another bump that we haven't realized. But as of today, we're looking at about a $400,000 uptick in TOT. Sales, we were very optimistic in our projections, and we're coming in about right where we expected. So our sales tax revenue is about exactly where we thought. Property tax, we're about $400,000 under our projections, and that's really due to a challenge on predicting what the increment tax would be with relation to the RDA. So our revenues are about what we expected them to be on the big three. And so with that, we're still expecting, getting back to the budget, we're still expecting about $1 million shortfall unless we make some changes for next fiscal year. Chuck?
Great. Thank you, Mike. So again, over the next 18 months, we will be looking at budget deficit, and of course, we will close that gap. But let's get down to some of the reasons why we are now projecting a budget deficit. The increase in PERS costs, loss of millions in dollars of payback and redevelopment funds, loss of grants, infrastructure liabilities. These are the items that are really pushing the budget deficit. We, in the city of Monterey, want to continue to deliver excellence to our community. We are not going to stand for mediocrity. We are going to continue to keep our properties in excellent condition, and in order to do so, we must spend money in order to maintain them. We do not want to get in a position, to use an analogy, of waiting until the roof leaks. Because once the roof leaks, you then have the insulation that's wet that has to be replaced. You then have the damaged sheetrock that has to be replaced. You then have to repaint the walls and things of that nature. Let's fix the roof before, repair the roof before it actually leaks. It'll save us money, it'll save us time, and it's the right thing to do. A third critical issue facing the city of Monterey is its $1 billion military establishment. The Naval Postgraduate School, Defense Language Institute, Fleet Numerical, and outside, of course, the city limits of Monterey, Fort Hunter Liggett, Camp Roberts, billion-dollar industry to this county. Now, we've got 3 major installations here in the city of Monterey. But if one or more of those installations were to go away, it won't just impact the city of Monterey. It'll impact the entire region. There are folks here who are employed by the military who live in every one of the cities in the county of Monterey. We have to protect that interest. And I think we do that by asking the question, why? Why do we need to protect that interest? It's in the best interest of this country in order to have outstanding institutions like DLI and NPS here. There is no other place in the world where these institutions can thrive the way they thrive in Monterey because, again, of their physical and intellectual assets that are here. There was a move afoot, as you might remember, to move the DLI, at least talk about it. It was on the BRAC list, Base Realignment and Closure Commission list, to move it to Fort Huachuca, Arizona. Well, guess what? Professors didn't want to go to Fort Huachuca, Arizona. They wanted to stay here. And over there, they did not have a Monterey Institute of International Studies that interacts regularly with the DLI and provides training to its professors. And they didn't have the Naval Postgraduate School, which also does things in concert with the DLI. But why should it be here other than the fact that professors and students don't want to go to a less desirable place? It's because they can do it cheaper here. We can help them. We have been helping them through the military municipal partnership that we developed that is well known as the Monterey model, where we can deliver public works projects to their facilities at 20% less than they can do it. We want to continue that. We are going to continue to make strides into making it more cost-effective for these military installations to deliver the mission that they are charged with doing. We provide some $10 million a year in public works improvements to the DLI. Our general fund receives about $1 million of that $10 million for the management and oversight of those projects. We do not have that reach in the Naval Postgraduate School, but we're seeking it. We want to do more. Of course, we deliver fire service to both of those military installations, but we don't do a significant amount of work at the Naval Postgraduate School. We do some tree trimming. We have a few contracts with them, but we want to extend that reach again in order to make it the most cost-effective way to operate the MPS anywhere in the United States. So we will continue that charge. I have talked to my fellow mayors in Monterey County. I have asked them to consider developing a line item in their budget for the coming years to support a consultant to help us carry out the word that Monterey is the place for NPS in the DLI. We don't want to start in 2017, the next likely period when we will have a base realignment and closure commission round. We need to get going now. And so whereas Monterey has carried the weight of this challenge in the past, I am now asking for mayors throughout the Monterey Peninsula at a minimum to help us in that charge. Another critical issue we are all keenly aware of is our water crisis that we're in. The latest is we've got a bit of a delay in developing the boreholes that are necessary to develop the test wells thereafter in the city of Marina. Last week, there was a planning commission meeting in the city of Marina where we were hopeful that they were going to make a decision on allowing Cal-Am Water to go forward with the boreholes so that they could test the subsurface water there and then eventually go forward with the test slant wells. Well, there were a lot of questions, a lot of comments that were delivered to the Planning Commission right before the meeting began, and the meeting was, or that particular item on the agenda was dropped and continued. I am calling for a special meeting of the Monterey Peninsula Regional Water Authority, the mayor's JPA. We are trying to set a meeting for this week and invite the mayor of Marina and his staff to our meeting, and we're going to try and work out a plan to move this forward. If we don't get those those boreholes put in the ground and tested in the next month or so, we're going to be into the snowy plover nesting season, and it will delay this some 6 to 9 months. We don't want that kind of delay. We need to move forward with the possibility of a desal project as soon as possible. And now for some good news. That's enough of this old boring stuff that we are faced with. The Downtown Specific Plan, as many of you know, has been adopted. There has been a lot of progress made. New developments have come forward because the council has provided a great deal of certainty into its expectations and desires for development in the downtown area. Many of you know that the council has pushed for a number of years for mixed-use development. It is a residential component of the mixed-use development that is really driving the economic feasibility of these projects. You have seen it already. You will see more of it. Cafe Trieste, when that restaurant burned, or the former occupants of that structure, the structure burned, developed the restaurant space on the ground floor and 2 or 3 units on the second floor. The rents are very attractive. They were rented in a very short period of time. We now have outdoor seating in front of Cafe Trieste. The property owner there spent about $50,000 and provided that seating. It is being highly utilized. We have several other businesses who have requested outdoor seating in front of their restaurants, where we take out a couple of parking spaces and ask them to provide tables and chairs. Turn 12, a restaurant at the corner of West Franklin and Tyler Street, has opened. About an 8,000 square foot restaurant, seems to be doing very well. It replaced a nightclub where we had several police calls on a regular basis going to, so that was a big upgrade to that particular site. Mixed-use project, the old Regency Theater, craft brewery on the ground floor, housing units above it. That is moving along nicely. Nice improvement to the facade on Alvarado and an improvement to the backside on Cali Principal. The mixed-use project that is proposed for the burn site As some of you know, there is water available for that development. The city pre-committed 1.6 acre feet of water for the residential component of that mixed-use project. We have seen very attractive renderings of a 2-story structure that fronts on Alvarado and a 3-story structure that fronts on on Tyler Street. And if that project comes to fruition, that will be a huge improvement not only to the site, but to the experience that one receives when going downtown. You know, I posed the question earlier about why we do what we do. It's really, let's not get to the point where we say it's all about money, it's all about profits. That comes only if we answer the question why correctly. And the answer to the question why we have plans, why we make improvements, why we are doing what we're doing is to create a better experience for our residents, a better experience for our visitors. If we do so, more people will come and frequent those business districts, those parks by the ocean. And as a result of having more people in those areas, they will spend more money, and then the result will be better profits for the business owners, higher property valuations. But let's get to the point of why. The why is for us to have a better experience. Everything else positive will follow from that. We've had reconstruction of our Del Monte Pacific intersection just outside these doors here. Huge improvement for safety and also very attractive street lighting and a big positive improvement to that corner. The 595 Munra site, which is across from the Trader Joe's Shopping Center at the corner of Munra and Webster, has been approved for a mixed-use development. We are hopeful that construction will move forward there within the next 6 months. That is our hope. I noticed I talked outside in the foyer with Mr. Outson, who is somewhere in the audience. I don't see him right now, but I'm sure he's sitting here somewhere. There he is. He has a major development on Lighthouse Avenue where there are dilapidated buildings currently on the site, where his proposal is for a mixed-use development with some 32 housing units on Lighthouse and Foam. That project, I understand, will be before the Planning Commission this evening, and we are hopeful that things will move rather quickly with that project. So I think at this point, you've heard about the downtown specific plan, the importance of the conference center and its role that it will play with attracting people from around the world. There is new development proposed, and there's recent development that has been completed as a result of the confidence people have in the success and future of this community, of the certainty that the council and planning commission and other organizations in the city have provided. We also have the North Fremont plan that will be before council I think it's the second meeting in February. It's planned for that. Obviously, the status quo on North Fremont isn't working. It is getting worse rather than better. So I believe the specific plan, once adopted, will be a boost to improving that particular neighborhood. The waterfront plan is moving along smartly. We expect to have a draft report on the waterfront plan within the next 60 days. That will include the possibility of a parking structure on top of the parking lot near the waterfront. We will have, of course, studies to realize and appreciate what the view impact might be for a 2-story or 3-story parking garage on that site. We will have more green space as the plan is proposed in the waterfront area, again, to enhance the experience for the visitors to our waterfront, to Fisherman's Wharf. So there's a lot happening in the city of Monterey. Our most successful business district in the city of Monterey, by far, is Cannery Row, where occupancy of the hotels there often exceed 80%, and in the peak months exceed 90%. A lot of people down on Cannery Row, millions that go to the aquarium, who go to Cannery Row to view the water from various public spaces such as the Hoveton Way at the aquarium, at the Monterey Plaza Hotel, where the Dolphin Fountain is, at Steinbeck Plaza on Cannery Row. And speaking of Steinbeck Plaza, the Cannery Row Company, I understand, has commissioned a monument, a tribute to the characters of Cannery Row, approximately $1 million improvement of a wonderful monument that will be erected in the Steinbeck Plaza, and it will show its appreciation, its tribute to Doc and the boys, to Steinbeck, and to today's characters of Cannery Row. And the city of Monterey certainly appreciates that generous gesture on the part of the Cannery Row Company, and that in itself, I believe, will be yet another attraction, another reason to visit Cannery Row. So with that, I think that you who are here today have come to learn the answer to why, and with all that you're getting, you really want to get an understanding, a better understanding. I think that's best delivered through answers to questions that you have. So I will stop there, and I see that President Phillips is here, and he will probably pepper us with a few questions.
Yes, this year the mayor has said he's tired of our softball questions, and he wants stronger ones from us. So I promised him that today.
That might have been a mayor, but it wasn't the mayor of Monterey.
I apologize for being late. I was, my day job's in Casterville, and normally I'm waving to the traffic, kind of laughing at them as I go to Casterville, and today I had to turn around, and I'm stuck in the traffic, and I'm saying, I'm getting all ticked off, and I'm late for this event, and I always try and turn something positive, and I started to say, you know what? If we didn't have that traffic coming in here, there wouldn't be all these jobs that we provide for these people who drive into town. So I like to try and shift things to a positive thing. So that's why I was late. Thank you, Bob, for getting things started. My name's Sam Phillips. I am the president of Monterey Commercial Property Owners Association. And I'd like to thank the mayor and the city manager for being up here again for, what, the 5th year now?
My 7th.
7th year. Okay, my 5th year, his 7th year, and hopefully more to follow. So I'm going to start off the questioning, but first, since we're in a small, intimate setting, go ahead and just raise your hand, and I'll point you out and stand up and ask your question. I'm going to try and keep us on a bit of a path here with our major topics that we deal with regularly. But the first hardball question, I was going to save this for last, but instead I'm going to say, Mr. Mayor, are you running in the 2011 mayor election?
Well, 2011.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
2014. I'm 3 years old here. 3 years.
I can say thank you for the question, Sam. I could say that I'm still enjoying the ability to serve the city of Monterey as mayor. I'm into my 7th year as mayor. We have accomplished a lot, but there's a lot left to do. So as long as I'm enjoying this privilege of serving the greater community, I will continue to run for mayor.
Good. Thank you for not dodging around that one. I thought that was the first dodge. So trying to stay on topic and ask questions regarding these specific issues, I will, first topic will be water. And if you guys have questions regarding water, let's ask those now. My first question will be, there is a group who's attempting to push for a public buyout of Cal-Am in the water source, and they've gotten, to my knowledge, they've gotten all the signatures, and they'll likely be on the ballot for vote come November. So my question to you, Mayor, is what is your personal position or City of Monterey's position on this? And also, what's the JPA's position? Have they taken a stance on that?
The JPA's position is to not be distracted from items like this. Our charge is to deliver a new water supply project to the Monterey Peninsula. I don't have to tell you how important that is. Sam, you're in the construction business. Without water, you have limited ability to develop new projects. It is essential that we continue our charge, our responsibility to this community to deliver a new water supply project. Public Water now will have this item on the agenda to ask the folks, should CalAm be purchased? That is not part of the mayor's JPA. The mayor's JPA is to make sure that the project, a water project, goes forward. Now, if the public decides that it wants to have public ownership of the water supply project, so be it. We want to make sure there's one to buy, whether it's owned by the public or whether it's owned by Cal American Water. What we at the JPA want is a water supply project that is cost-effective and reliable. We're facing a severe drought right now. Some have said the worst drought since they've been keeping records on rainfall in this area. This is exactly what we're concerned about. We cannot stop and go, sputter around. We need to have a water supply project so that we can fulfill our general plans. We need to have a water supply project so that we're able to use effectively the water that we have in order to meet our needs, whether they are at our homes or our businesses. The water's out there. It's called the Monterey Bay. We need to have that water, we need to desalinate it, and we need to deliver it to our people. That's our responsibility. So as far as my personal viewpoint on whether the water supply project on the Monterey Peninsula should be owned by the public or CalAm Water or some other private entity, I would say to you, I would like to have a water supply project that is cost effective. Doesn't matter who owns it, make it be cost effective. Yeah, thank you for the question, Mary Alice. Brine discharge in the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary is a concern of all of ours. There are ways to disperse the brine into the sanctuary. We are concerned about the potential or possibility of creating dead zones in the bay. So as to whether there is someone who is studying that particular facet, I don't know the answer to that. I would assume so, but I do not know. We have had, as you may know, a couple of interns from Monterey Institute of International Studies do a white paper on that very subject. So that that is more in the realm of science than I am capable of delivering a cogent answer to that question. I'm not a scientist. I would leave that up to the experts. But as has been mentioned, there are many, many desal projects that operate today around the world. I understand that our responsibility is a little bit greater with brine discharge because it's into our sanctuary. But we will have answers to that.
Currently, to my knowledge, there's 3 different groups: CalAm, the Deepwater, and is it called the People's Project, Nataraga. At this point, my understanding is that Cal-Am leads the race to the end of a desal plant right now. But can you speak upon these 3 different projects and where, I guess, how they could potentially play a role? Could there be 2, one in Moss Landing, one in Marina? Does the Deepwater have ground to stand on potentially? Where are we at with your knowledge?
Okay. Well, right now, the Mayor's Authority, the Monterey Peninsula Regional Water Authority, at this point, is in support of the Cal-American Water Project. That project is being vetted through the California Public Utilities Commission. Cal-Am Water Company is our area's water purveyor and therefore has a bit of advantage relative to getting financing. They have the wherewithal to do that. They have been working with the CPUC on trying to reduce the cost of water to this community. The Deepwater project may be a viable project. Their idea is to have an open water intake where they draw water from some 60 feet below the surface area into the photovoltaic layer where there are fewer microorganisms to extract and therefore minimize the impingement of marine life. That may be a viable alternative sometime in the future if the Cal-Am project fails. My understanding is Deepwater Desal is really looking at a regional desal project that would produce water for some 25 million gallons a day. The desal project from Cal-Am is somewhere around 15 million gallons of water per day. So that's a possibility. But right now, as you mentioned, Sam, Cal-Am is farther along in the process than the other 2 projects. Cal-Am is looking at extracting water from the subsurface rather than from open water, which is preferred by the environmental groups and is preferred by many others because of the reduced impact on the environment.
Thank you. Again, if you have a question, just raise your hand and I'll point you out. Water, any other things on water? I can continue to ask questions, but I want to get to these other topics. I'm going to jump to downtown, and I'll stay a bit on the water topic. Recently, the city has allocated a certain amount of water for developers on specific projects. And in my opinion, and McPose, this is a good thing, but my understanding is that there's a time frame to it. One, can you speak upon those projects and also talk about the time frame of the water, and it needs to be developed by this point or start, if you can talk about that.
Right. Yeah, the city of Monterey, I believe, was approximately 4 acre-feet that it had left to allocate from its water reserve. The idea was to kickstart development on those projects that the city felt were most important to the revitalization of business districts. There were a few downtown. There was also one on North Fremont that was allocated water, the old Bay Pet Hospital at the corner of Della and North Fremont. A project that was approved many years ago. Actually, it went through a process. It's a mixed-use project. Couldn't go forward with development. Didn't have enough water credits. It had a few water credits from the old pet hospital, but not enough for the newly proposed project. There was a timeline delivered, attached, let's say, to those water credits. The reason for the timeline was to encourage folks to move forward on redeveloping their projects. If the property was not redeveloped, and I honestly, I think it was 1 year time frame. Carl, correct me if I'm wrong, because was it 6 months? 6 months that they had to deliver plans to the building department. So a very, very short timeline, 6 months. Now, if the project that has been allocated water doesn't come forward with the plans within 6 months, they would be in jeopardy of losing that water allocation. Of course, there's always an opportunity to appeal or to get an extension of that time frame. But the impetus behind it was to encourage those who are ready to develop to get moving and get those projects developed to improve and revitalize the business districts in which those properties are located.
Okay, Mr. McCarthy, I'll get you involved here. Let's talk about the downtown plan. It's been approved. McPoa's, to much of McPoa's liking. The private sector has certainly begun to improve their buildings and spend their money to revitalize downtown, as some of those projects you mentioned before. But there is a public piece to this approval, and the question that continues to come up now that it's been passed is how do we pay for these things, and time frame of the multiple, the two-way streets, sign changes, so on and so forth. Go ahead.
Our Plans and Public Works Department now is putting together a priority list and a potential rough schedule of how it would move forward. As far as funding, that's a bigger question in that we need to find revenue. I touched on that briefly this morning when I mentioned the budget. But without a clear new revenue source, very little of the very little of the downtown specific plan can be funded by the city. So a potential revenue source, for example, would be a sales tax, of course. If there was a new sales tax of 1% in the city would receive roughly $7 million per year. I would expect the council would want to dedicate a portion of that money towards the downtown specific plan. I'm not super familiar with the Monterey Hotel. I don't think it's moved forward. It's moving forward slowly in the permit process, but I don't have a real clear update. So I think what I'd like to do is send a note back to I'll send a note to you and then to Bob to forward it for a more complete answer, because I don't have that right now. They're looking at potential investors to see who could redevelop it, whether it be low-income housing or if there was a private investor who wanted to secure it for themselves. I know we've talked to investors who might be interested in redeveloping the hotel rooms for private use. I can't get more specific than that at this point, though, that they're confidential discussions.
It's right that they be market rate housing units. But secondly, we have no choice. There's been a change in the law. If the city does not provide incentive, for example, water, density increase, height increase, variance of some sort, if it doesn't provide an incentive for the project to be developed, we cannot require housing units for affordable housing units. So that's been a recent change in the law. We do have a responsibility to our citizenry to provide affordable housing. We need to provide that for some of our workforce. If the city owns the property, such as is the case right now, the land at Munros and Webster, we could require the development to provide affordable housing. If the city doesn't own that property and we're not providing incentives, we have no right to do it anymore. There were many units built over the past 30 or more years under our inclusionary housing ordinance that required apartment owners to set aside some 15% of the units that were developed for affordable housing. That cannot be done anymore without incentives. But a lot of those units that were developed 30 and plus years ago are now expiring. There was a stated period of time. At one time, it was a 20-year period. Then it went to a 30-year period of time that required the property owner to maintain a specific number of units for affordable income folks. Those apartment units are now expiring. That time period, those time periods are now expiring. So we're actually having fewer units on the market for those who have moderate income. So again, as a responsibility, if the city of Monterey is an owner of property, we can then require affordable housing units. But if we're not an owner, not providing incentives, we no longer have that right to require apartment units to be developed for affordable income families. Yeah, let me first say for the sales tax, the city of Monterey has the lowest sales tax of any city in Monterey County. If you look at Pacific Grove, Sand City, Seaside, Marina, Delray Oaks, Carmel, they've all raised their sales tax. We are the last one. We've been able to put off this sales tax increase because we have managed our budget well. There comes a time where you really need to look at the future and how it's shaping up with and without a 1% sales tax increase. We can get along. We can limp along without an increase in the sales tax, and we can go down to mediocrity in the maintenance of our roads and storm drains and buildings. We could do that. But I don't believe this community wants that. I think this community wants to stay at a level of excellence. And in order to do that, we need to reinvest in our infrastructure. We need to reinvest in our roads. Take a look at that segment of road on Pearl Street in front of the Monterey Youth Center that is just deteriorating. There are roads, segments of roads like that in other parts of the city as well. That's not acceptable. We need a first-rate roadway system for a first-rate city. And in order to do that, you need to spend a little money. Specific to your question, Barbara, we still have time to get this 1% sales tax increase on the November 2014 ballot if we want to. But there's little work that needs to be done yet. I think the citizens of Monterey need to be comfortable with the fact that their city council has done all it can in order to wring out every efficiency it possibly can in the way we operate this business, the city of Monterey. It's a municipal corporation. We work much like you in the private sector work. We look at what's our greatest return on investment, what is that dollar going to bring back, not just in profits, but in services to our people. We've done a pretty good job of it, I think. Over 7 years ago, when I was elected mayor, we had over 550 employees. We now have a little over 400 employees. We have a lot of department heads that are serving in 2 and 3 position capacities. We have really tightened our belts over the years. And it's time that we now have a new revenue source in order to make the improvements that you want and that you deserve. So I think the next step in this process is we have to hear more from the citizens of Monterey as to whether or not they want to go forward with a sales tax increase. And that's what we're looking toward. We're getting the word out that that is a potential that we really need to consider, but it needs to be done. That work needs to be done in the next few months in order to make the November ballot. And it won't be a decision that the City Council of Monterey makes as to whether or not we have a 1% sales tax increase. It's going to be a vote of the people. So it's the residents of Monterey who will vote on it. The city council will have the action of putting it on the ballot if the citizens really want to consider it and vote on it. Sure.
Barbara, to answer your question on process a bit more, the council, if it believed it was appropriate, would need to put it on the August 5th, I believe, or the first meeting in August council meeting to put it on the agenda. That would be the last possible council date where they could do that. And then often I get questions about what would be the percentage of vote to pass the sales tax, and that depends. One, if it's a general sales tax where it's not directed specifically to any specific project, it's a 50% plus one vote. However, if it's specific to a project, such as a building or a specific project, then it requires a 2/3 vote. We haven't conducted a study on it because it really depends on what goes downtown. If we create a great environment, then we'll have better businesses to come downtown. So no, to answer your question specifically, we haven't conducted a specific study on it.
Go ahead.
Let me be clear that the city of Monterey does not own the site. It's privately owned, and that's why I use the word if rather than when. The city of Monterey does not control whether or not the property owners of the burned site will move forward, finance the development, and actually construct it. So the city of Monterey has heretofore has done all that it could in order to facilitate the successful development of that land, but we do not control it. So I cannot give you that answer. I am hopeful that the project will continue to move forward, but I noticed that a representative of Saucito Land Company, the owner of that burn site, is here, and you may want to talk to Mr. Anderson after the meeting. Because again, the city does not control the fate.
My understanding is that they plan to break ground in 2014, but definitely talk to Mr. Anderson for clarity. I'm going to jump to the city budget since we started to talk about the 1% potential tax. I think many of us would say we're a city that has a $100 million budget, and we have trouble maintaining our streets. And we realize that 70%, I believe it's 70%, goes to employee pension packages, basically employees. We have a deficit coming up that Mr. McCarthy had spoken upon of $1 million shortfall. And my question is, with 70% of the budget going to employees, and I heard you earlier, you have done some cuts to eliminate positions. Is there specific attention being addressed to the pension plans and the specific employee packages for the future?
I'm still waiting for the softball question, so that's not it. There's been a lot of talk about pensions all throughout the state and through the country for that matter. The city, frankly, has been a leader statewide in pension reform. We're one of the few cities in the state, historically now, that pick up the entire employer share of PERS costs. The way that works, just so you know, is PERS assigns a percentage that the employer is supposed to pay, and PERS assigns a share that the employee is supposed to pay for their ongoing pension costs. Many cities pick up both the employee and employer share. So the city has been covering the entire employer share, and in addition, just 2 years ago, employee groups agreed to pick up 3% of the employee-employer share. So our employees are paying much more than other employees throughout the state. So we've made great strides in covering pension costs. In addition, the city is forced, as all cities in the state are forced, to conform to new PEPR laws, which have reduced ongoing or future pension costs for new employees. Current employees are protected under state contract law and frankly federal contract law from having their existing pension benefits changed. So there's not a whole lot that cities can do. Even in the bargaining process, those pension formulas currently aren't allowed to be touched. There's some talk of initiatives statewide that could change that potential. I hear if those do go through, they would be fought in the courts for years and years. So I think the city is doing as much as it can possibly do to control pension costs for its employees. And we continue to hope that other cities do throughout the state. I'm on the Employee Relations Committee for the League of California Cities, and that's one of our hot topics. And often other cities come to talk to me about how we bargained for the employees to pay that additional share. We're one of the leaders in the state for that.
Can you educate us on when you guys come up with the city budget for your June, I believe it's a June adoption that eventually city council will take? What is the process? And I think my end question is there room for a subcommittee of business people to evaluate what my understanding is the city staff introduces to the city council for then the city council to take a vote on what the city staff presents? Is there a avenue for maybe a committee to evaluate what the city staff is going to present to the city council, since officially it is a part of their salary package that they're essentially presenting? That's geared towards both of you. One, the process. Two, to the mayor of, is there room, and would you consider some sort of committee that kind of is in between the two?
Well, the process on the budget is that staff will bring to council a mid-year budget report in March, just to give an update on where we're at, some forecasts, and if necessary, suggest potential cuts. As I mentioned earlier, I think that although we're expecting a $500,000 shortfall this current fiscal year, the staff will be able to find ways to mitigate that without any notice to any operation changes. Sam's talking about a potential budget committee. That would be a council decision if they wanted to create some form of committee to be advisory to the council. There's a big piece in there, however, when we talk about employee compensation, which is frankly roughly 70% of our general budget. There's a negotiation process that needs to be done in a confidential manner, and its advisory is through closed session. So for those pieces, it would be very challenging for a committee to discuss other than just general thoughts.
I would suggest that after the March budget presentation is delivered to council, that you review it, you and the organizations to which you belong, and that you can then make recommendations to staff, copied to the council. I'm not quite convinced that a committee, whether it be business or non-business people, that would get together to deliver recommendations on the budget would be the way to go. You get 10 people in the room and you're probably going to have 10 different directions in which to go. Everybody has their own pet projects. Their priorities, of course, differ. You elect a council in order to represent the greater good of the community, of the greater interest of the community. And I think that the budget is one of the highest priorities, one of the highest items that the city council deals with. So I believe you should have input. The public should always be allowed and, in fact, encouraged to deliver input on important matters actually developing a committee, a budget committee, I don't think is a good idea.
I think most of you know we're on our second search for a city manager. The first one didn't produce candidates that the council was satisfied with. This second search has gone much better. The interviews produced 2 finalists, one of which has now accepted another job elsewhere in the state. So we're down to 1 finalist, and the council is having a closed session meeting next Tuesday to discuss next steps. Now, just because one's a finalist doesn't mean that person will get the job, because there's still a process to go forward. But the council will be talking about next steps next Tuesday in closed session.
Okay, jump into homeless and downtown. This continues to be a topic of discussion with the transients that travel through, come and go, and seem to cause problems in our downtown. I know at one point we had increased the police staffing downtown, but I also know that it's continuing to be an issue. We see times that it gets better for a bit, and then next thing you know, we're back at where we were last year. So question is, what are the permanent solutions here? And I'm specifically not talking about homeless who do not disrupt the downtown. I am specifically talking about the ones who are disruptive.
Well, thank you very much for making that distinction. Oftentimes, there's a general term of homelessness, and that encompasses those who break the law downtown as well. And Sam, thanks for making that distinction, because that is a big one. Homelessness is a social issue, as we all know, and that's not something that the city can solve. What we are looking at is those who are breaking the law downtown, and we're looking at 2 paths for ways to help solve that. One is the potential for private security downtown. We have an excellent police department, and we've increased our staffing downtown, but they can't be there at all times. If there's a way to supplement the police presence through a private security, that would be a great avenue for one piece of it. The second piece is there's been discussion about an ambassador program downtown, where there are 1 or 2 people with orange vests on, so they could be easily identified, to pass out flyers, but also to give out information to people who may need it, or people who are in need of social services. We're hopeful that dual track, if both are able to go forward, would make a significant difference downtown.